Follow the journey of Anna, a young girl who faced incredible challenges, but found strength through the support of a compassionate billionaire who became her guiding light. As Anna begins to reclaim her life, she learns to confront her past and find a sense of belonging, proving that even the most broken hearts can heal. This story sheds light on the power of love, trust, and personal strength, all while navigating the complexities of forgiveness and emotional recovery. The narrative unfolds through pivotal moments where Anna must decide how to heal from the deep scars left by her past. In this powerful Black story, you will witness the courage it takes to face difficult truths and find a path to inner peace. As the story progresses, Anna's emotional journey mirrors many Black stories of resilience and hope. Her transformation is a testament to the power of support, understanding, and the willingness to grow. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft, but his brow furrowed with worry. The girl flinched, but then she managed to nod weakly, her lips trembling. It hurts," she whispered again, her breath shallow. The man knelt down beside her, his heart sinking as he noticed the blood staining her torn shirt. It was clear she had been hurt, but how? Why was she alone? "What happened to you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes scanning the alley as if expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. She shook her head, tears beginning to well up in her eyes. I don't know," she sobbed quietly, her small hands clutching at her side in pain. The man quickly looked around again, ensuring they were still alone. He reached into his pocket, his fingers trembling as he pulled out his phone. "I'm calling an ambulance," he said firmly, already dialing. The girl flinched again, her face pale and full of terror. "Please, don't call them. I don't want to go back there." Her voice cracked, and her hands tightened around her side, as if the pain was too much to bear. The man's mind raced. Who would hurt a child this badly? Why was she so afraid? "You're safe now," he said, trying to reassure her, though his own heart was heavy with confusion. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you." He gently touched her shoulder, his words firm but gentle. As the seconds ticked by, the man realized that this was no ordinary encounter. This was something more, something deeper. He couldn't just walk away. He had to help. He couldn't just leave her out here alone in the cold, in pain, and afraid. His gaze softened as he looked at her, the realization hitting him hard. This girl, this small child, had no one else. No one to turn to. No one to protect her. And that was when he made up his mind. He wasn't going to just call the authorities and leave. He was going to help her, no matter what it took. "You're going to be okay," he said, lifting her carefully in his arms, his eyes never leaving hers. The cold air bit at his skin, but he barely noticed as he carried her down the alley, determined to find the help she so desperately needed. The sound of her soft sobs echoed in his ears, and he knew that whatever had happened to her, he couldn't turn his back. Not now. Not when she needed him the most. The man quickly carried the girl to his car, his heart racing with every step. He could feel her small body shivering in his arms, but he refused to let her go. He opened the door and gently placed her in the passenger seat, fastening the seatbelt as if she were made of glass. "It's going to be okay," he whispered, even though he wasn't sure of that himself. The girl didn't respond. Her head rested against the seat, her eyes closed, tears still staining her cheeks. The pain was evident in her every breath. The man could feel his chest tightening with every passing second. He slammed the door shut and rushed to the driver's side, starting the engine. As the car sped down the empty streets, he glanced at the girl again. He wanted to ask her what had happened, who had done this to her, but the words didn't seem right. Not yet. Not until she trusted him. The silence between them was thick, heavy with unspoken fears. The man kept his eyes on the road, but his mind raced. What had she meant when she said she didn't want to go back there? Who could have done this to a child? His hand tightened around the steering wheel as the questions kept coming, one after the other, but he pushed them aside for now. He had to get her to safety first. As he drove, his thoughts shifted. This wasn't just some random encounter. There was something about this girl, something that called to him, something he couldn't ignore. She was clearly terrified, but there was also a strength in her, a quiet resilience. He could see it in the way she held herself, even in her pain. It was as if she had already been through so much. Yet she was still standing. His heart ached for her. He didn't know her story, but he felt a deep sense of responsibility. He had to protect her. He had to make sure she was okay. The car rolled to a stop at a red light, and the man turned to glance at her again. Her eyes were closed, her face pale, but she still managed to keep her small hands clutching her side. He could feel the weight of the moment, the heaviness of her silence. And then, as if on cue, the girl spoke. "I don't want to go back there," she said, her voice so soft, so quiet, it was almost a whisper. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. The man's throat tightened. "You don't have to," he said softly. "You're safe now. You don't ever have to go back to whatever happened there." He glanced at her again, searching for any sign that she believed him. She didn't respond, but he saw her fingers relax slightly on her side. It was a small gesture, but it was something. It was a sign that she was starting to believe, just a little. The car continued to drive, the silence between them still palpable, but it wasn't as heavy as before. There was hope in the air now, a flicker of it. As they approached the hospital, the man felt a knot in his stomach. He knew this was just the beginning. He couldn't change everything in one night, but he was determined to start. Determined to give this girl a chance. He parked the car and rushed around to her side, helping her out as gently as he could. The hospital lights were bright, almost blinding, but he didn't notice. All he could focus on was getting her inside, getting her the help she needed. He didn't know where her journey would go from here, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to leave her. Not tonight, not ever. The man rushed through the hospital doors, his heart pounding as he helped the girl inside. The bright lights of the emergency room felt almost blinding, but all he could focus on was her. He walked quickly to the front desk, his voice steady but urgent. "She's hurt," he said, looking down at the small child in his arms. "She needs help. Now." The nurse at the desk looked up, her eyes widening at the sight of the girl, and immediately sprang into action. "Get her on the stretcher. Stat," she ordered. The man stepped back, watching as the hospital staff surrounded the girl, gently but efficiently moving her onto the stretcher. He could hear the faint sound of her labored breathing as they wheeled her away. His mind raced. What had happened to her? Who had done this? The questions kept swirling in his head, but for now, he knew the only thing that mattered was that she was safe. He followed closely behind, his eyes fixed on the girl, his heart sinking with every step. They entered the trauma room, and the man was asked to wait outside. He stood by the door, his hands clenched into fists, as the sounds of the medical staff working inside filled the air. The girl was in good hands now, but he couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness that clung to him. He wanted to be there for her, to protect her, but all he could do was wait. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, a doctor came out of the room, her face serious but not grim. "She's stable for now," the doctor said, looking at the man. "We've stopped the bleeding, and we're running some tests to make sure there's no internal damage. She's a tough little one." The man nodded, his breath finally escaping from his lungs. He had been holding it in, too afraid to breathe until he knew she was going to be okay. "Can I see her?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The doctor hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "You can visit her briefly, but we need to monitor her closely for a while." The man didn't wait another second. He followed the doctor back into the room, where the girl lay on a hospital bed, hooked up to various machines. She looked so small and fragile, the bruises and cuts on her skin standing out against the stark white sheets. His heart ached for her. He didn't know who she was or where she came from, but in that moment, she was everything. The girl's eyes flickered open as he approached. She looked up at him, her expression a mix of confusion and fear. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at him with wide, wary eyes. The man pulled up a chair beside her bed and sat down, trying to make himself as unthreatening as possible. He smiled softly, though he wasn't sure why. "You're safe now," he said gently, his voice full of warmth. "No one's going to hurt you. You're going to be okay." The girl didn't respond, but he could see the tiniest hint of relief in her eyes. It was just a flicker, barely noticeable, but it was enough. "You're going to be okay," he repeated, a little more firmly this time. The girl slowly lifted her hand, and placed it on the side of the bed, her fingers trembling slightly. She looked at him for a long moment, and then, very softly, she whispered, "I don't want to go back there." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had suspected something wasn't right, but hearing her say it out loud made everything more real. Someone had hurt this girl. Someone had made her feel like she had nowhere to turn. The man's heart clenched. "You don't have to go back," he said, his voice barely audible. "You're safe now. You're with me, and I'm not going to let anything happen to you." She didn't say anything else, but her eyes seemed to soften, just a little. The man sat there for a while longer, just watching her, feeling an overwhelming need to protect her. He didn't know her story, but he couldn't just walk away. Not now. Not when she needed him the most. He stayed with her, even after the doctor came in to check on her again, even as the hours passed and the night grew colder. He stayed by her side, silently vowing that no matter what happened, he would help her. He would be the one who didn't turn away. She wasn't alone anymore. The man sat at the edge of the hospital room, his mind racing. The soft hum of machines around him was the only sound, and it seemed to heighten the silence that filled the air. The girl was still asleep, her breathing steady but shallow, the marks of her pain still visible on her pale face. He had been watching over her for hours, unable to leave her side. Every time a nurse came in to check on her, he felt an overwhelming sense of protectiveness. They had given her pain medication, but there was still so much uncertainty. He couldn't help but wonder what had happened to her, what kind of life she had lived before he found her in that alley. He had questions, so many questions, but he didn't want to overwhelm her. Not yet. He had to be patient. The door opened quietly, and the doctor walked in, glancing at the monitors before looking at the man. "She's stable," the doctor said, her tone calm but reassuring. "We've run all the necessary tests, and there's no internal damage, but we're keeping an eye on her." The man nodded, relief flooding through him, but it didn't last long. There was still so much he didn't know. "When will she wake up?" he asked, his voice low. The doctor hesitated for a moment, glancing at the girl. "It could be a few hours, or it could be longer. She's been through a lot, so she needs rest. You can stay with her for now, but we'll need to run some more tests later." The man nodded again, not sure if he could leave, even if he wanted to. He didn't want to abandon her. He wasn't sure what kind of family she had, if she even had one, but right now, he was all she had. The doctor left quietly, leaving the man alone again with the girl. He reached out, gently brushing a lock of hair away from her forehead. Her skin was warm, but it didn't bring him comfort. He was still so full of questions, so full of concern. The girl stirred slightly, her small hand twitching as if she were about to wake up. His heart skipped a beat. He leaned in closer, watching her with a kind of tenderness he hadn't felt in years. "Hey," he whispered softly. "It's me. You're okay. You're safe now." Her eyes fluttered open, just a crack, and for a moment, the man thought she might be looking right through him. But then, she focused, her gaze meeting his, and he saw a flicker of recognition. "You're still here," she said, her voice rough from sleep. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied, his voice steady but warm. She swallowed, as if trying to gather the strength to speak. "Where am I?" she asked, her eyes darting around the sterile room. "You're at the hospital," he explained gently. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you here." The girl's eyes filled with confusion and fear, but there was something else too, something he couldn't quite place. She opened her mouth to speak again, but she hesitated, unsure. "I don't want to go back there," she whispered, her voice breaking. The man's heart clenched. He had suspected something was wrong. He had known that whatever had brought her to that alley was not just a random incident. She had been running from something, someone. He could feel it in the way she spoke, in the fear that still haunted her eyes. "You don't have to go back," he said firmly, his voice low but filled with resolve. "I won't let you. You're not going back to anyone who hurt you." The girl didn't say anything, but her eyes softened, just a little, and he could see the smallest glimmer of hope in them. It was fleeting, but it was there. The man stayed with her for a while longer, watching as she fell back into a restless sleep. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. He had no idea what her life had been like before, but he knew that whatever it had been, He was going to make sure she never had to go through it again. As the hours passed, the man couldn't help but wonder who had done this to her, who had caused this pain, and most of all, why. But for now, he couldn't focus on that. All that mattered was that she was safe, and he would make sure it stayed that way. The man sat in the sterile waiting room, his thoughts racing as he stared at the ticking clock on the wall. He hadn't moved in hours. Every so often, he would glance up, expecting to see someone come through the door, anyone, but no one came. The hospital staff had been kind, but no one could answer the one question that plagued his mind. Who was this girl? Where did she come from? And most importantly, what had happened to her? He had no answers. All he knew was that he had to do something. He couldn't just sit here and wait for the system to take over. He had to take action. He had to protect her. She was alone in the world, and for whatever reason, it seemed like he was the only one who could help her. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the tile floor, drawing the attention of a nurse walking by. She gave him a concerned look but didn't stop. He wasn't sure what he was going to do next, but he couldn't just sit and wait for the answers to come to him. He needed to find out what had happened to her, who had hurt her, and why. With a deep breath, he walked toward the emergency room doors. He had made up his mind. He wasn't going to just leave her to the hands of strangers. He was going to find out everything he could, no matter the cost. As he stepped into the hallway, his phone rang. The caller ID read unknown. His heart skipped a beat. He answered quickly, pressing the phone to his ear. "Hello?" There was a brief silence on the other end, followed by a shaky voice. "Sir?" the voice said, hesitant but familiar. "It's me, the girl, the one you helped." The man's breath caught in his throat. "Are you okay?" he asked, panic rising in his chest. I'm okay now, but I need to tell you something," the girl said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't go back there. I don't want to. I don't know what they'll do to me." The man's heart broke at the fear in her voice. "You're not going back," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "You don't have to. I'm going to make sure you're safe." The girl fell silent for a moment, and then the words tumbled out in a rush. They told me I wasn't allowed to leave, that I had to stay there, that no one would ever care about me. I didn't believe them at first, but—" Her voice broke, and the man's heart shattered. He could feel the weight of her fear, her despair, and it cut through him like a knife. "Who told you that?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Who did this to you?" The girl's voice trembled as she spoke. "I don't know his name. He's one of them. One of the people who hurt me. I think they're trying to hurt me again. I don't want to go back there. Please." Her plea was more than he could bear. He could feel the urgency in her voice, the desperation. He had to act, and he had to act now. He couldn't allow her to go back to whoever had done this to her. "Listen to me," the man said, his voice low and reassuring. "You're not going back. You're with me now, and I'm going to keep you safe. We'll figure out everything together. But you're not going back to that place, not ever. Do you hear me?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, very softly, the girl spoke. "I hear you." The man let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. He felt a rush of relief, but it was fleeting. He still had no idea what was really going on, but he had made her a promise, and he intended to keep it. He quickly made his way back to the hospital room where the girl lay. As he opened the door, he was greeted by the sight of her lying quietly in the bed, her small body covered with a hospital blanket. She looked so fragile, so small, and yet so strong at the same time. He could see it in her eyes, the quiet determination that still burned beneath the fear. He pulled a chair up to her bedside and sat down, taking her hand gently in his. "You're safe now," he said, his voice steady. "No one's going to hurt you again. I promise." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with uncertainty, but there was something else there too, a flicker of trust. For the first time since he had found her, the man felt a small spark of hope. They were in this together, and no matter what happened, he would do everything in his power to make sure she was never alone again. The man sat at the small table in the quiet hospital cafeteria, his fingers tapping nervously on the plastic surface. The girl was resting, still asleep in the room down the hall, but his mind was far from peaceful. He had been able to keep his promise to her, at least for now. She was safe. She was no longer in immediate danger, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was yet to come. He had no idea what was waiting for them outside the hospital walls. Who had hurt her? Why had she been left alone? And what kind of life had she been living before he found her? The questions were like a constant hum in the back of his mind. He had been a billionaire for most of his life, used to running his own company and making decisions in boardrooms. But this was different. This was not something that could be solved with money or influence. This was about a child's life, her future, and the people who had caused her pain. His cell phone buzzed, breaking him from his thoughts. He glanced at the screen and saw an unknown number. His heart skipped a beat. It was a risk to answer, but he had to. It might be about her. It might be the answers he had been searching for. He swiped the screen and held the phone to his ear. "Hello?" he said, trying to keep his voice steady. There was a brief silence on the other end, and then a low voice spoke, familiar but unsettling. "You don't know who I am, but I know who you are. I know what you're trying to do." The man's heart thudded in his chest. "What do you want?" he demanded. The voice on the other end chuckled darkly. "I want you to stay out of this. You don't belong in her life, billionaire. You have no idea what you're dealing with." The man's grip tightened on the phone, his knuckles turning white. "I'm not backing off," he said, his voice sharp. "I'm going to protect her. Whoever you are, I'm not afraid of you." The voice on the other end paused, as if considering his words. "You don't understand. She's in danger. You don't know who you're dealing with." The man's stomach twisted with a new sense of urgency. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" There was a long pause, and then the voice spoke again, more quietly this time. "She doesn't just need protection from them. She needs protection from herself." The words hung in the air, heavy and cryptic. The man's mind raced, but before he could ask anything else, the line went dead. He stared at the phone, his mind spinning. What had he just heard? Who was this person, and what did they know about her? The girl was just a child. What could they possibly mean by needing protection from herself? He couldn't let it go. He couldn't just walk away. Whatever had happened to her, whatever had caused her pain, it wasn't over yet. He had to keep going. He had to find the answers. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of thoughts in his head. He wasn't going to let this stop him. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt her again. With a determined look on his face, he stood up from the table, leaving the cafeteria behind. He had a mission now, a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just going to wait for answers anymore. He was going to find them. He was going to uncover the truth, no matter what it took. He walked to the hospital's main entrance, stepping out into the cool evening air. He looked up at the sky, feeling a surge of resolve course through him. No matter what he had to do, no matter how difficult the journey ahead would be, he was going to protect her. He wasn't going to let anyone get in his way. The answers were out there, and he was going to find them. He had no idea who was behind the mysterious call, or what they meant by needing protection from herself. But he wasn't going to stop until he figured it out. He walked back to the hospital, his mind set. He was ready to do whatever it took to give the girl the life she deserved, a life where she would never have to be afraid again. The man walked down the quiet hospital hallway, the weight of his thoughts pressing heavily on him. He had just come from the girl's room, where the doctor had given him a vague update. She was stable, still recovering, but there were still no answers about her past. The phone call earlier had rattled him, and now, more than ever, he felt like he was being drawn into something much bigger than he could have imagined. The mystery deepened with each passing minute, and the girl's cryptic words kept echoing in his mind. She needs protection from herself. What did that mean? He couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something vital. As he approached the elevator, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from an unknown number. His pulse quickened as he read the text. "Stop looking into it. You don't know who you're dealing with." His hand tightened around the phone, his heart pounding. This was the second warning he had received in less than a day. Whoever was behind this clearly didn't want him getting any closer to the truth. He could feel the anger building inside him, but he kept his composure. He couldn't afford to lose focus now. He had to protect her. He had promised her that, and he wasn't going to back down. He typed out a quick response. his fingers trembling slightly. "I don't care who you are. I'm not stopping." He hit send before he could second-guess himself. He stepped into the elevator, taking a deep breath as the doors closed. The ride to the ground floor felt long and suffocating. As the elevator descended, his mind raced with possibilities. What was he dealing with? Who were these people? And why were they so determined to keep him away from the girl? The weight of the situation was beginning to settle in. He wasn't just helping a child in need anymore. He had become a target. As the elevator reached the ground floor, the doors opened, and he stepped out into the lobby. His eyes scanned the room, searching for anything out of place. The lobby was bustling with activity, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. He took a few steps toward the exit, his eyes still scanning the area, but nothing seemed unusual. He pushed the thought aside. It was just his mind working overtime. He needed to stay focused. He reached the front door of the hospital and stepped outside into the cool night air. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, and the city felt strangely quiet. He glanced around, still feeling that uneasy sensation that he was being followed, but there was no one in sight. He made his way to his car, his mind spinning with the possibilities. As he got into the driver's seat, he glanced at his phone again, but there were no new messages. He started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, his thoughts still swirling. He had to keep going, no matter the cost. He couldn't stop now. He had to find the people behind this, the people who had hurt her, and get her the protection she needed. He drove for what felt like hours, turning down quiet streets, past darkened storefronts, his mind consumed with one thought: where was she really from? What was the truth behind the mystery that had been thrust upon him? He made a sudden turn, heading toward the city's outskirts. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he was going to find them. He wasn't afraid of what he might uncover. The road ahead was unknown, but he had to follow it. There was no turning back now. He had made a promise, and he was going to keep it, no matter what. As he neared the outskirts of the city, a sharp noise broke through his thoughts, a loud screech of tires, followed by the unmistakable sound of a car coming to a sudden stop. His heart raced as he slammed on the brakes, his car screeching to a halt just in time. He looked up, his eyes scanning the darkness, but he saw nothing. The road was empty, and the sound had disappeared as quickly as it had come. He sat frozen for a moment, trying to steady his breathing. Something wasn't right. He wasn't alone. He could feel it. He slowly put the car in reverse and backed up, his eyes scanning the area again. There was no sign of another car, no movement, nothing. He didn't know if he had just been paranoid, but something in his gut told him otherwise. He couldn't shake the feeling that whoever was behind this was closing in on him. Whoever had hurt her, whoever was trying to stop him, they were watching. And he wasn't going to stop. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his jaw clenched. This was far from over. The man's phone buzzed again, and for a moment, he hesitated. He had been driving aimlessly for what felt like hours, trying to shake off the unease that had been growing in his chest since the call earlier. But he knew he had no choice. He needed to know who was behind all of this. He glanced at the screen, his heart sinking when he saw the same unknown number from earlier. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel as he swiped to answer. "Hello?" he said, his voice calm but steady. "I told you to stop looking into this," the voice on the other end said, its tone colder than before. The man could feel the heat rise in his chest, the anger starting to boil over. "You don't scare me," he snapped, his grip tightening on the wheel. "I'm not backing off. Who are you, and why are you threatening a little girl?" There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, and then the voice spoke again, lower this time, with a quiet menace. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. You think you can just come in and play hero? This isn't a fairy tale, billionaire. There are things in play here that you can't even begin to understand." The man's heart pounded in his chest. "What are you talking about?" he demanded. "Who is she? Why is she so important to you?" There was a long pause, and for a moment, he thought the call had ended. Then, the voice spoke again, this time with a hint of frustration. "You want answers? Fine, but you're not going to like them." The words sent a shiver down his spine. "What do you mean?" The voice let out a sharp breath, almost a sigh. "She's not just some orphan you can save. She's been marked. By us. by people who can make your life very difficult if you keep pushing. The man's mind raced. Marked? What does that mean? The voice laughed bitterly. You really think you're going to fix this? She's been in our sights for a long time. You're just a distraction. You're nothing but a pawn in a game you don't even know you're playing. Panic rose in the man's chest. What are you going to do to her? He demanded. Leave her alone. There was a cold, almost bored tone in the voice as it replied. She's already in too deep. There's no turning back for her. No matter how hard you try, you're wasting your time. The man's pulse raced as he heard the finality in the voice's words. This wasn't just about a child anymore. This was something much bigger, something far more dangerous. If you so much as touch her, I'll make you regret it, the man said, his voice low and lethal. The voice chuckled darkly. You think you can intimidate us? We don't fear you, but we'll let you have your little crusade. It won't change anything. The call ended abruptly, leaving the man in stunned silence. His mind raced with 100 questions, but one thing was clear. Whoever these people were, they weren't just going to walk away, and neither was he. He had made a promise to that girl, and he wasn't going to back down now. He wasn't going to let whoever these people were hurt her, not while he had breath in his body. He took a deep breath, pulling the car over to the side of the road. He had to think. He had to plan. But he couldn't do it alone. He needed help. He needed allies. People who knew how to navigate the world. He was suddenly thrust into people who understood how to fight back against powerful enemies who operated in the shadows. With a determined look on his face, the man dialed a number he hadn't called in years. The phone rang 3 times before the voice on the other end answered. It's been a long time, the voice said, a hint of curiosity mixed with concern. I need your help, the man said, his voice steady. I'm in over my head. There's a girl, and there are people after her. I need to know who they are, and I need you to help me stop them. The voice on the other end paused for a moment, then responded. You've got my attention. I'll help, but you need to understand something. This isn't a game. If you're going up against these people, there's no turning back. You can't unsee what you're about to get involved in. The man's jaw clenched. I don't care. I'm not backing down. Not now. Not ever. The voice on the other end sighed. All right, we'll do this your way, but be ready. Once you're in for good. The man nodded to himself, the weight of the decision settling heavily on his shoulders. There was no turning back now. This was no longer just about protecting a little girl. This was about something much bigger, something that went deeper than he could have imagined. He wasn't going to back down. He was going to find out who these people were, and he was going to stop them, no matter what it took. The man's heart raced as he paced back and forth in the dimly lit office. His mind was clouded with confusion, frustration, and an overwhelming sense of urgency. He had promised the girl that he would protect her, and now, with each passing moment, the danger seemed to grow stronger. The call he received earlier had shaken him to his core. Whoever these people were, they were serious, and they were not going to stop until they got what they wanted. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized how deep this went. He wasn't just dealing with a group of dangerous people. He was up against something much larger, something far more powerful. He clenched his fists, his jaw tight. He couldn't let them win. He couldn't let them hurt her. He had to find out who they were, and he had to do it fast. He turned to the computer screen in front of him, a vast network of information laid out across several tabs. He had been researching for hours, trying to make sense of the clues, trying to piece together the puzzle, but every lead he followed only seemed to take him deeper into the unknown. His eyes scanned the screen, jumping from one document to another, from one name to the next. Every time he thought he was getting close to an answer, the trail would vanish, and he was left with more questions. He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration mounting. He was about to close the laptop when a new message popped up on the screen. It was from an encrypted email address. The message was short, direct. Stop searching. Leave her alone, or you'll regret it. His heart skipped a beat. He stared at the message for a moment, unsure how to respond. The words were a direct threat, but something about the message seemed different this time. It wasn't just a warning. It was a message that someone wanted him to know that they were watching. He gritted his teeth and typed a response. I won't stop. The man nodded to himself, the weight of the decision settling heavily on his shoulders. There was no turning back now. This was no longer just about protecting a little girl. This was about something much bigger, something that went deeper than he could have imagined. He wasn't going to back down. He was going to find out who these people were, and he was going to stop them, no matter what it took. The man's heart raced as he paced back and forth in the dimly lit office. The girl needed him. She had already been through enough, and now, with every passing minute, the danger seemed to be getting closer. He had no choice but to keep going. He picked up the phone and dialed the number of his contact, the one who had promised to help him find answers. It rang 3 times before a voice on the other end picked up. "What's the situation?" the voice asked. "I need everything you've got on a group called the Shadows," the man replied, his voice steady but urgent. "I don't care what it takes. I need to know everything about them. Who they are, what they want, and why they're after a little girl." There was a long pause on the other end, and then the voice spoke again, slower this time. "You're getting in over your head. This is dangerous, more dangerous than you realize." The man's grip tightened on the phone. "I don't care. I need this information, and I need it now." There was a sigh on the other end, and then the voice spoke again, quieter this time. "I'll send you everything I have, but you need to understand something. Once you go down this road, there's no turning back. These people don't just stop, they don't back down, and they will come for you if they think you're a threat." The man nodded, his mind already racing ahead. "I understand. Just get me the information." The phone clicked as the line went dead. He put the phone down and ran a hand over his face, exhaustion settling over him. The weight of the situation was starting to take its toll. He wasn't just fighting for the girl's safety anymore. He was fighting for his own survival as well. The shadows were real, and they were powerful. But that didn't matter. He wasn't going to stop. He couldn't stop. He had made a promise, and he was going to see it through. He turned back to the laptop, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he opened the encrypted files that had just been sent to him. His eyes scanned the documents, each one revealing more than the last. The Shadows were more than just a criminal group. They were an organization with far-reaching influence, operating in the darkest corners of the world. They had connections everywhere, from government officials to corporate giants, and they were not afraid to use their power to get what they wanted. And now, they were after the girl. The man's mind raced. He had no idea how he was going to take them on, but one thing was clear: he wasn't going to back down. He couldn't. For her, for himself, for everything he had fought for, he was going to face them head on. The clock was ticking. The shadows were coming, and he had to be ready. The man stood in front of the dimly lit office, his fingers gripping the cold steel of the door handle. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more urgent than the last. He had spent the past few days digging deeper into the shadows, uncovering disturbing truths about the organization. They were not just a criminal group, they were an invisible hand, controlling everything from politics to business, their reach extending to every corner of society. He had to stop them. He had to protect the girl. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open, the familiar scent of old books and leather greeting him. The office was empty, the desk clean except for a few scattered papers and an old photograph of a family. He glanced at the photo briefly, then turned his attention to the computer on the desk. He sat down and powered it up, his fingers trembling slightly as he connected to the secure network his contact had set up for him. The screen flickered for a moment before the files appeared: thousands of documents, encrypted and categorized, detailing the Shadows' operations. "I'll send you everything I have, but you need to understand something. Once you go down this road, there's no turning back. These people don't just stop, they don't back down, and they will come for you if they think you're a threat." The man nodded, his mind already racing ahead. "I understand. Just get me the information." The phone clicked as the line went dead. He put the phone down and ran a hand over his face, exhaustion settling over him. He had no idea how he was going to take them on, but one thing was clear: he wasn't going to back down. He couldn't. For her, for himself, for everything he had fought for, he was going to face them head on. The clock was ticking. The shadows were coming, and he had to be ready. The man stood in front of the dimly lit office, his fingers gripping the cold steel of the door handle. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more urgent than the last. And now, They were coming for her. His pulse quickened as he realized just how deep this went. He was not just protecting a child anymore. He was involved in a conspiracy that stretched far beyond anything he had ever imagined. He couldn't sit back. He had to act. He pulled out his phone and dialed his contact's number, his hand shaking. The phone rang twice before it was answered. "You need to get out of there," his contact said urgently. "They know you're looking into them." The man's heart raced as he stood up, his thoughts swirling. "Who are they? What do they want with her?" he demanded. "The shadows? They want control. And you're in the way now. You've been poking around too much, and they're coming for you. It's not just about the girl anymore." The man's stomach twisted in knots. He could feel the weight of the situation settling in. "What do I do?" he asked, his voice tight. "You need to leave. You need to get to her before they do." His family had crossed paths with the shadows in some way, and now they were paying the price. The man clicked on the file and began reading further. The more he read, the clearer it became. Ethan's family had made enemies, powerful enemies, enemies who were willing to do anything to maintain control, and the girl, she was somehow connected to all of this. The document mentioned her name in passing, but it was enough to send a chill down his spine. She had been used, exploited. He had promised her that he would protect her, and now it felt like the whole world was closing in around them. He couldn't fail. Not now. Not when he was so close. He climbed into his car and started the engine, his mind focused on one thing: finding her before it was too late. As he drove, his thoughts raced. How had it all gone so wrong? He was just trying to help a child. But now, he was caught in a web of lies, secrets, and danger, with the shadows on his tail, and no one he could trust. They'll stop at nothing to make sure she disappears, and if they think you're a threat, they'll come for you too. The man's breath caught in his throat. "Where is she?" he asked. "We don't have much time," his contact replied. "She's in a safe house, but not for long. You need to move fast." He didn't wait for another word. He hung up, grabbing his jacket and heading for the door. The cold night air hit him as he stepped outside, the weight of the world pressing down on him. The man's car screeched to a halt in front of the dilapidated building, its faintly flickering street lamp casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. His mind was racing, his thoughts clouded by urgency. The safe house was supposed to be hidden, secluded, but nothing about the situation felt safe now. Every move he made felt like a step closer to a trap. He had never been more certain of one thing: they were coming for her. They were coming for both of them. The car sped through the streets, the city lights flashing past as his mind worked over every possible scenario. He couldn't afford to make a mistake. He couldn't afford to lose her. The road stretched out before him, dark and endless. But he didn't care. He wasn't going to stop until he found her. And when he did, he would make sure that no one would hurt her again. He knew better than to trust the silence. Every fiber of his being told him to keep moving, to get to her before anyone else did. He rushed toward the entrance of the building, his feet pounding against the cracked concrete. The door creaked as he pushed it open, and the moment he stepped inside, a sense of foreboding swept over him. The place was dark, but he could hear faint sounds coming from the back. A door creaked open, and a voice called out to him, low and cautious. "You shouldn't have come here." He froze, his heart skipping a beat. "I'm not leaving without her," he said, his voice firm, despite the wave of uncertainty that threatened to rise in him. "Where is she?" There was a pause, and then the voice spoke again, this time with a note of resignation. "She's in the back room, but you need to understand something. It's not safe here anymore. The shadows are closing in." The man didn't wait for any more explanation. He bolted toward the back, his hands shaking with adrenaline. As he rounded the corner, he saw her sitting on the floor, her knees drawn to her chest, her face pale. She looked up at him with wide, fearful eyes. "You're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. Relief flooded through him, but it was quickly replaced by a new sense of urgency. "We have to go, now," he said, rushing toward her. He reached out a hand to her, his fingers brushing against her trembling arm. She looked up at him, uncertainty clouding her expression. "Where will we go? They'll find us," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They won't," he said, pulling her to her feet. "I won't let them." He led her quickly toward the back exit, his every instinct on high alert. He didn't trust this place, didn't trust anyone here. He had to get her out, and he had to get her out now. As they stepped outside, the cold air hit them like a wall. He looked around, his eyes scanning the streets for any sign of movement. They weren't alone. He could feel it. "We need to move fast," he said, his voice low. "Stay close to me." But just as they started to move, the sound of tires screeching interrupted the silence. His heart dropped into his stomach. He turned, but it was too late. A black van sped toward them, tires screeching as it came to a stop just feet away. The side door slid open, and two men stepped out, their faces hidden in the shadows. The man's heart raced, but he didn't hesitate. He grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her back, putting himself between her and the approaching men. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice steady despite the fear that gripped him. The men didn't speak, but they didn't need to. It was clear who they were. The shadows. They had found them. One of the men took a step forward, his face still hidden in the darkness, and said, "You've made a mistake, Billionaire. You don't know what you're dealing with." The man's pulse quickened, but he stood his ground. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with," he said, his voice cold. "And I'm not afraid of you." The man moved quickly, his training kicking in as he grabbed the nearest object, an old metal pipe that had been discarded on the ground. He swung it toward the men, forcing them to step back. But it was clear that the shadows weren't going to be stopped that easily. The other man lunged toward him, but the man managed to sidestep, narrowly avoiding the blow. He could feel the adrenaline surging through him as he fought to protect the girl. The fight was chaotic, a blur of movements, but he wasn't going to back down. He couldn't afford to. As the first man recovered, the second one pulled a gun. The man's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't flinch. He had to act fast. He grabbed the girl, pulling her behind him as he tackled the man with the gun. They both went down, rolling across the cold concrete, the gun skidding out of reach. The fight was far from over, but the man was determined. He couldn't let the shadows win. Not now. Not when they were so close. He was fighting for his life and for hers. The man stumbled back, his body aching from the struggle as he pushed himself to his feet. The two men from the shadows were momentarily disoriented, but he couldn't afford to lose focus. His heart pounded in his chest as he scanned the dark alley. The girl was safe for now, behind him. But there was no telling what the shadows would do next. He knew they wouldn't give up easily. They were relentless, and he was in their way. He glanced over his shoulder, making sure she was still there, still out of harm's reach. The fight had left him winded, but he wasn't going to back down. Not now. He had promised her that he wouldn't let anyone hurt her, and he intended to keep that promise no matter the cost. As he turned back to face the men, one of them, the taller one, shook off the blow and reached for a knife, his eyes burning with rage. "You should have stayed out of this," the man growled, his voice dripping with venom. "You don't know what you're dealing with. You think you can protect her? You're nothing." The man's breath caught in his throat. He didn't have time to waste with empty threats. With one swift motion, he reached for the pipe that had fallen to the ground earlier, his fingers wrapping around it tightly. He wasn't going to give them the chance to corner him. The second man, who had been trying to recover, lunged at him, but the man was ready. He swung the pipe with all his strength, knocking the man off his feet and sending him crashing into the wall. The first man, still holding the knife, charged forward, but the man was quicker. He sidestepped, using the pipe to block the incoming strike, then twisted the weapon out of the man's grip, sending it clattering to the ground. He had to act fast. He grabbed the taller man by the collar and slammed him into the wall, his breath coming in quick gasps. "This ends now," the man said, his voice low and cold. "I'm not leaving until she's safe. So, tell me who you are. Tell me why you want her." The taller man's eyes widened, but he refused to speak. He was trying to regain his composure, but the fear was evident on his face. The man's grip tightened. "I'm not asking you again." The man hesitated, then in a low voice muttered, "You really want to know? Fine." He paused, his eyes darting around nervously. "She's not just a girl. She's a symbol, a pawn in a much larger game." The man's heart pounded. "A pawn?" he repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. What game are you talking about? The man gritted his teeth. You think you can just walk away from this, don't you? He stepped forward, closing the gap between them. Tell me what's going on. I won't let you hurt her anymore. The taller man looked around, panic rising in his eyes. He seemed to weigh his options for a moment before he gave a shaky sigh. They won't stop, he said. The shadows are everywhere. They control everything. They own people, governments, businesses, and she's part of their plan. A part of something much bigger than you could ever imagine. The man's mind was racing. This wasn't just some underground gang. This was an international network, one with far-reaching power. Why her? He demanded. Why is she so important to them? The man's voice dropped to a whisper. Because she's the key. She's the only one who can stop them. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. The man's head spun. He had thought he was helping her escape from danger, but now it seemed like the danger was much bigger than he had ever realized. Stop them? The man repeated, his mind trying to process what he was hearing. How is she supposed to stop them? The taller man didn't answer immediately. He seemed to hesitate, as if weighing how much he should reveal. Finally, he spoke. She has something they need. Something they've been after for years, but she doesn't know it. She doesn't know what she's carrying. And if you don't get her out of here, if you don't protect her, they'll use her to get what they want. The man stood frozen, his mind racing. This was far beyond anything he had imagined. The Shadows were not just an underground criminal organization, they were a global force, and the girl was at the center of it all. He couldn't let her fall into their hands. Not now, not ever. You're lying, the man said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they weren't true. He could feel the weight of what the taller man had said, feel the danger closing in around them. The man's grip on the other man tightened. But before he could say anything more, the sounds of sirens filled the air. The girl, he had to get her out of here. He couldn't stay and fight any longer. He slammed the man against the wall once more before running back to the girl. We have to go. Now, he said, his voice urgent. She nodded, her wide eyes filled with fear, but there was something else there too. Trust. She trusted him. He grabbed her hand, pulling her away from the chaos, knowing that the fight was far from over. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going to stop until she was safe. The man and the girl sprinted down the alley, their footsteps echoing in the silent night. The cold air bit at their faces, but they didn't slow down. The sirens were growing louder, and he could hear the distant roar of police cars closing in. He didn't know how much longer they had before the Shadows or the authorities arrived, but he knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to let anyone take her from him. He could feel her hand in his, trembling but strong, as they turned the corner and darted into another narrow street. The girl was barely a step behind him, her breathing ragged, but she wasn't complaining. She was still trusting him, even after everything that had happened. That trust, that belief in him, was all he had left, and he couldn't afford to lose it. Keep up, he urged, his voice low and focused. We're almost there. They reached a nondescript black sedan parked by the curb. He yanked open the door, practically throwing her inside before sliding into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life as he slammed his foot on the gas pedal, the tires screeching as they sped off into the night. Where are we going? The girl asked, her voice small but determined. She was looking at him now, a mixture of fear and curiosity in her eyes. Somewhere safe, he said, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Somewhere they can't find us. He glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see headlights chasing them, but the street was empty. For now, they were safe. The sound of the sirens faded, and the tension in his chest began to ease just a fraction. Are you okay? He asked, his voice softer now. She didn't answer right away. She was staring out the window, her expression unreadable. He couldn't help but wonder what was going through her mind. What was she thinking, after everything that had happened? I don't know who they are, she said finally, her voice trembling. I don't know why they want me. I don't even know what's real anymore. The weight of her words hit him like a ton of bricks. He knew she was right. Everything had changed for her in the blink of an eye. The life she had known, the life she had been forced to live, had shattered, and now, she was looking to him for answers, for safety, for hope. He glanced at her, his heart breaking for her. I know it's hard, he said, his voice tight with emotion. "But we're going to get through this. I promise." She looked at him then, her eyes wide with disbelief. "How? How can you promise me that?" she asked, a hint of desperation in her voice. "How can you protect me from them?" His grip on the steering wheel tightened again. The weight of her question hung in the air, and he knew the answer wasn't going to come easily. He wasn't sure how to protect her from the shadows, from the people who had been hunting her for so long, but he wasn't going to stop. He couldn't stop. "I don't know how," he admitted, his voice quiet but resolute. "But I will find a way. No one is going to hurt you again. Not on my watch." They drove in silence for a few moments, the steady hum of the engine filling the void between them. He could feel the girl's gaze on him, her uncertainty palpable. He wished he could say something that would make everything better, something that would erase the fear in her eyes. But there were no easy answers. They were both caught in a game, far bigger than either of them. But for now, that didn't matter. What mattered was that she was with him, and he would do whatever it took to keep her safe. As the city lights grew fainter in the distance, he knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were enemies at every turn, and the shadows were far from defeated. But he wasn't afraid anymore. He had a purpose now. He had something to fight for, and as long as he had her by his side, he would never stop. The girl looked at him one last time, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think we'll be okay?" she asked. He looked at her, his heart full of determination. "Yes," he said firmly, "we will be." The car sped off into the night, and with it, any chance of turning back. They were in this together now, and whatever came next, they would face it side by side. No matter how dangerous, no matter how impossible it seemed, he would protect her, and together, they would fight until the very end. In this gripping tale of survival and mystery, a young girl is caught in the dangerous web of the shadows, a powerful organization with far-reaching influence. As she seeks refuge, the man who promises to protect her finds himself drawn into a world of deception and danger. This is a story of trust, courage, and the fight for freedom, set against a backdrop of intrigue and relentless pursuit. The shadows will stop at nothing to get what they want, but the man will do whatever it takes to keep the girl safe, even if it means confronting powerful enemies and risking his own life. These black stories are filled with emotional twists, revealing the strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable odds. As the man and the girl fight to survive, they discover that their bond is stronger than the forces working against them. Will they make it out alive, or will the shadows prove too powerful? This journey through the heart of danger and mystery will keep you on the edge of your seat. Dive into this thrilling adventure of black stories, where the line between good and evil is blurred, and survival is the ultimate goal. The stakes are high, and the danger is real, as every decision they make brings them closer to the truth and to the deadly enemies hunting them. These black stories highlight the resilience of those who refuse to back down, even when faced with overwhelming odds. With every twist and turn, they uncover more about the dark forces at play, but will they be able to stop them before it's too late? Find out in this heart-pounding story that's sure to leave you questioning who the true villains are in this world of black stories.